You know, sometimes we want things exactly the way we want them. And sometimes having them exactly the way we want them prevents us from getting outside of the box and digging down deep and finding resources that we wouldn't find otherwise. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start off telling you about a musician that some of you may have heard of and some of you may not have. How many of you know about the pianist Keith Jarrett? Raise your hand. Keith Jarrett? He's probably, I think he's the greatest musician in the world alive today. And he has an album out that was put out in 1975 that's the best-selling piano album in history. It sold millions all over the world. It's called the Cologne Concert. It's now the 40th anniversary of it. And he's it's all improvisational piano. And I don't mean improvising on a theme. I'm talking about he'd sit down and play a note and make up everything based upon nothing but what's coming through him. He's a spiritual student of Gurdjieff's teachings. He's an incredible person. But I found out something about control and getting what we want and outcomes that completely blew my mind. They were talking to him this week, and they said, tell us about the day that you did this concert in Cologne, Germany, and everything. How was it for you? And thinking he would have a nice little conversation, he says, oh, you wouldn't believe it. He said, first of all, he said, my back gave out that week, and I was in a brace, and I was in terrible pain. And this is a guy who moves around a lot. He said, also, I hadn't slept because of the pain for 3 nights. We had driven all day to get there. Oh. They put off the concert from the 8 o'clock normal time because something bumped us until midnight. The audience was there at midnight, and the caterer didn't show up, so I didn't get any food. And I went on, I wolfed some food down, then I had indigestion. Just before we go on stage, we find out, about 2 hours before, that the piano, which was a Bosendorfer, this piano that we just bought, replicates electronically a Bosendorfer piano, but it was you were supposed to have an 8-foot Bosendorfer Imperial Grand, and it wasn't there. Instead, there was this ratty baby Grand that some people had found backstage. It was a practice piano. The pedals didn't work at all. Oh, it was totally out of tune. It was tinny. It was awful. The soundboard was warped. It was in the worst possible condition. And he said, and here it was midnight, and he said, we're going to send everybody home, or at least send the engineers home. We thought, well, what the heck? We're paying for the engineers. They're here. It's the middle of the night. We'll go ahead and record it, but it's going to be awful. So because he couldn't do any of the pedals, he had to do everything different. He couldn't play in the top end. He couldn't play, to play in the bottom end, he had to do rolling bass lines and all kinds of wild stuff that he never did. And he did this whole concert. As he went on stage, he just went like this with a salute and then sat down and started playing. He knew that he had played well, but he knew that it was not going to be usable, so he, they had recorded it, but forget about it. So 2 weeks later, he's with his producer, and they find a cassette of it, and they put it in the car cassette player, and they realized, they turned to each other, they said, oh my gosh, we got to put this out. So they worked sonically on it to make it sound as good as they could. It's now the greatest top-selling piano album of history, and it's absolutely unbelievable. James Dillard Freeman, I lent it to him. He's the Unity Poet Laureate. He said it was one of the most inspiring pieces of music he'd ever heard, and I think it's the greatest piece of music I've ever heard. Now, what am I telling you this about? I'm telling you that it isn't about the conditions of life. The conditions of life don't give you the outcomes that are for the highest good. Your consciousness gives you the outcomes that are for your highest good. This man was practiced, he was ready, and he showed up, and because the circumstances were less than ideal, he reached down and he found out things that he would have never found out otherwise. They say that Gandhi was when he was going to speak to Parliament in England, and it was going to be a big deal. Of course, he always meditated for 2 hours in the morning. But they didn't know that. What they saw was that he was out in the street all day playing soccer, playing football, English football, with the children in the street. Because he liked to do it, and he was having a great time with them. And they finally stopped him. They said, aren't you going to prepare for your speech today? And he said, I'm sure if God has something to say, God will say it. And went back to playing soccer. Now, he was prepared in consciousness, but he did not try to control the outcome through his preparation. I've shared before about my losing my notes, which occasionally I'll look at something because my memory is not the world's best, but I had to let go of it. Where in your life can you get totally out of control? That means controlling that which is yours to control, to accept the things you cannot change, and to have the courage to change the things you can, which is namely yourself. Where in your life, and how can you know the difference? There was a woman who came to me, and I actually wrote this down because it was so confusing and complex and convoluted that I couldn't keep track of it and tell you about it. But she came to me about 25 years ago, and in counseling she said she couldn't figure out whether she should continue volunteering or let go of the volunteering, whether she should confront her spouse about something she found out or keep quiet about it, whether she should break up with him or stay with him in the marriage, whether she should rent or buy her house or move, whether she should quit or keep her job, and a number of other things. There were so many things and choices. She says, I'm overwhelmed right now. I don't know which way to turn. I don't know what to do. And I said, your brain is on overload right now. And when your brain is on overload, it is time to let go of control. That means offloading all of these things. And we went through meditation where we let go of all these things. I loose you and I let you go. I fully and freely release you. All these things we let go of one by one. Her marriage, her volunteering, her job, her home, her location, everything one by one. And 10 days later, and I wrote this down so I can get this right. 10 days later, she was offered a position out of state at a 50% higher salary, doing the very thing she was volunteering for, so she could afford to buy a house, and her relationship was taken care of in that decision. So, nobody laughed at that one. I was but maybe it's close to home for some people. But the truth is that outcomes are not what we want. Is the highest and best outcome. When you're praying for healing, you're not praying for the cells of your body to move around in a certain order. You're praying to be aligned with a consciousness that will support the healing. So, God, put me in the consciousness that will support my healing. Together? God, put me in the consciousness that will support my healing. So if you're looking for a relationship outcome, you're not looking for that person to do what you think is the right thing, but you're looking for, God, put me in the consciousness that is in alignment with harmony here. So if you're looking for prosperity, you're not looking for a manifestation of dollar amounts. You're looking, God, put me into the consciousness that is involved in the flow. What I'm talking about here is not being in control, but being engaged. Oh boy, there's a difference here, and it's very subtle. It's one of those, God grant me the serenity things. You know, that serenity prayer is a really good meditation prayer. You could take each line of it, say it aloud, whisper it, say it in silence, sit with it. And then, of course, your mind's going to wander like it always does. Then you take the next line, and you just keep working with it, and it becomes a part of you. We're talking about internalizing your spiritual experience, and then you can discern. Discernment is the key. To be able to discern when's it mine to do. With this woman, what I told her was, give everything over to God. She says, how am I supposed to know what I'm supposed to do? I said, give everything over to God. Create a God box. Write down highest good in whatever area it is. Put it in the God box and leave it there. And she says, but how will I know when it's time to act? And I said, it's not about being passive. You're not supposed to say, I let go and I let God, chanting there while you're sitting on the freeway waiting for a truck to run you over. It's not about just being passive. It's about being fully engaged and fully surrendered. It's about being fully engaged without personal control. It's subtle, but it isn't about your ego thinking its way through the problem, but it's about being in the flow. And I told her, she said, well, how will I know when I'm supposed to act? I said, just say, whenever you have a question, just say, I need clarity here. I need more clarity here. And when it comes to you, when it truly gets in your face, then and only then do you act. This came to me a few months ago. Do not act unless you're specifically guided to act. You think, well, Josh, I'm not going to do anything. But you'd be surprised how things will present themselves to you if you create a vacuum. A vacuum of, I'm not rushing around like Daffy Duck trying to make everything work. I'm letting it go, and I'm just waiting. I went through, I think I've shared before about the time when there was all this stuff going on, and I was all upset because of all these people saying, thinking, and doing whatever. And a woman came up to me on Sunday morning after the service and said, Greg, I had a dream about you and I don't know what it means. Maybe you do. You were in a cow pasture and you were going around picking up cow patties, stacking them in your arms. What do you think that means? I knew fully well what that means. I was picking up the you-know-what of other people. And what happens when you do that? It gets all over you. So it was like, okay. And so I asked, what does this mean? And what I got was, in guidance, in prayer, unless it comes right into your face, don't do it. Don't address it. Because I wanted to go around and explain it to you and get you to understand and try to fix this and try to do that. Don't think I don't still do that. But in that situation, to the extent that I was willing to loose it and let it go and wait, and there were times I had to act, but it would come right in my face and I would then act. These are little things you can do. Put it in a prayer box. Let it go. That doesn't mean you don't act. This is not about, the problem with let go and let God is it becomes this passive cop-out. People do not want to take spiritual responsibility for their lives. Instead of using it as a spiritual tool so that the ego is not running the show, then it opens up for your spiritual self to come through. The spiritual guidance. The spiritual guidance will come through. But it means you have to let go of personal control. It works on the most mundane level. In churches, how many of you have ever been to a church potluck? Raise your hand. A church potluck. Everybody's been to a church potluck, right? But one thing I noticed, I've probably been to a couple hundred. There's an inverse proportionate correlation, yes, there is such a term, between how much control and sign-up sheets there are and how much food there is. The less you control what people bring, the more food they bring. The only time I've ever seen food run out at a church potluck is when everybody's got sign-up sheets for everything. Because if you control people, they don't come forth. But if you let them just, whatever, people bring what they want to eat. And I know, I keep saying it, so I'm not trying to force my will on this. But to the extent that you let go of personal control, the spiritual control can move you through and can bring about the highest good. But it means you've got to be flexible, you've got to have room to move, and you've got to listen to the words of Jesus. He warned us about this. He said, life is not just food, the body's not clothes. Think about the ravens. They're not sowing or reaping. They don't have a storeroom or a barn. Yet they are fed by God. And you are so much more valuable than a bird. Think about how the lilies grow. They don't labor or spin. But even King Solomon in all his splendor wasn't dressed like one of these. And if that's how God is clothing the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into fire, how much more will He clothe you, O you of little faith? So don't set your heart on what you're going to eat or drink. Don't worry about these things. The ignorant people run after it, and God knows you need them. Seek first His kingdom, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek first His kingdom, and all of these things will be given to you as well. What does this mean? This means get into alignment with the spiritual ideal, the spiritual principle, the spiritual substance, the spiritual flow. Get into alignment with the consciousness. Because the truth is, you came in to this world as a consciousness. Not just with a consciousness, but as a consciousness. And you will go out of this world as a consciousness, and you're not going to take any of these things with you. But you'll always have your consciousness. So if you want to see the highest outcome, in whether it's healing or prosperity or harmony or getting guidance or anything, align with the spiritual ideal. The consciousness. Say, God put me in the consciousness that would support my right answer. Together? God put me in the consciousness that would support my right answer. And it's amazing if you do that, things will work out. I remember I was in a church once that had a school, and the only thing that kept it from competing on the same plane as the other schools in town was that we didn't have a sports field. And the land right next door was on a lakefront property, so it was very valuable. And the parents in the school wanted us to go and make it happen, make it happen, make it happen. But the church that owned that land knew that we needed it, and they wanted to sell it for an exorbitant amount of money. And we had a lot of hanky-panky going on around it. And we just knew it wasn't right. When something's not right, when you gotta fight to make it happen, you gotta fight to keep it. And it's not right. So we knew just to wait. And that church actually went under, and somebody else picked up the land and they sold it to, they were willing to sell it to us for a very low price, but somebody found some sisters in town who liked our school. They weren't involved in unity, knew nothing about our philosophy, but they liked, how the philosophy showed up in the school. So they said, we'll pay for half of it if you people will raise the other half. And then they heard the story about how we waited and we didn't act, and we were acting in faith. They said, never mind, we'll pay for the whole thing. It was worth today about $1 million. And then we could use the money to build a sports complex in the sports fields instead of having to buy the land. Why did it work out that way? Because we let go of control. We let go of control. It works on the most practical and mundane level, but you've got to let go of your idea of your outcome, because the outcome everybody wanted was, they're going to sell us the land, we're going to make it happen, we're going to do this. Where in your life can you let go of unnecessary, useless control? And how do you do that? How you discern is that you've got to back up and do the spiritual work before you act, and then only act under guidance. There was one time I was in a church and there was a bunch of stuff going on, and I saw myself coming up out of muddy swamp, and all the mud came off of me as I came up out of the swamp. I was kind of like the Swamp Thing, and I came up out of the mud, and the words were, keep your fingerprints off of things. And to the extent that what does that mean? That doesn't mean you don't act. It means that you wait, and you listen, and you trust, and you take the energy that you would spend running around here like a chicken with your head cut off, and move within and do that work. But remember, Jesus, he picked the 12 disciples. How did he pick the 12 disciples? Did he do a management study? Did he go on Craigslist? Did he go on LinkedIn? No, what he did, it says, it's very clear. He went to the top of the mountain by himself and prayed and meditated all night, and then came down, and the next day he picked the 12. The 12 messengers, the 12 apostles. He did the work. So you've got something in your life thinking, I've got to act, I've got to make it happen. No, you don't have to make it happen. You have to let it happen through you. What Eric Butterworth says is that don't set it right, see it right. Seeing it right isn't just saying, I let go and I let God and doing nothing. It is doing the spiritual work and then being open to anything. Open to anything. And that's the trick. We are not here on earth to manifest stuff. Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say love stuff. He called that mammon, which is the Philistine god of stuff to which they sacrificed babies. He says, don't do that. You can't love both God and mammon. It isn't about getting stuff. It's about aligning with consciousness, and then the outcomes will align and the highest good will take place. But you have to let go of your attachments to stuff. And there's that wonderful parable Jesus told about, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person, and that literally meant rich in attachments, to enter the kingdom. And that means to squeeze through that opening, you've got to divest yourself of all the attachments you have to outcomes. And how do you do that? Highest good, greatest good. What is the will of God? The definition of the will of God is the highest good for all concerned. Now here, people are challenged with this. People are struggling with this. I can see it. I'm looking at you. You're looking at me, but I'm looking at you. And I'm seeing people, how do I do that? How do I develop this discernment? By taking the time to say, God grant me the serenity. By taking the time to say, oh God, put me in a consciousness that would support this healing. And then interesting things will happen. You'll be on a treasure hunt. Something will happen. Somebody will tell you something. You'll be led in a certain direction. You won't even know how it happened, but it will happen. Do you know what I'm talking about? And every single person in this room has experienced it on some level, in some place in your life. You can make this a day-to-day experience. You can live from this place. You can live from this place of surrender of all concerns. And that doesn't mean that you get exactly what you want in the timing, because it includes all of the spiritual lessons and all the spiritual growth that you're supposed to have, which isn't always convenient. And you know what? The greatest lessons in my life have been the most difficult and seemingly unjust situations, but if I'm willing to, I reach down deep for resources. That's what happened with Keith Jarrett. He reached down deep for the resources because the pedals didn't work. The piano didn't have bass. He had to do something else. And in doing that something else, he reached down for resources and they came forth. You will get spiritual backup. You will receive the guidance that you need. You will get the circumstances that will support you. But it's not just an intellectual exercise. It's a true and deep surrender. So I got a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to tell you about, but I'm not supposed to. See, part of this deal on Sunday mornings is I have to let go of control of my talk. So this is a time of moving into that serenity that accepts the things we cannot change, the courage that is willing to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so God, everything in our lives, everything that we think we have to hold on to, everything that we think we're going to make go a certain way, we just let it all go. And instead we say, higher good, higher good. Lift us up into the higher possibility. If we are on a spiritual thermometer, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we in this spiritual thermometer? What number? And just kind of see, where am I? 1 is the very bottom consciousness. 10 is the highest, and 5 is the point of demarcation between the lower and higher self, between the ego and the soul. Where am I right now with whatever I'm dealing with? And now imagine that thermometer, the red line going up, 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 up to a higher number. You might even go to a 9 or a 10. Why not? Feel yourself getting lighter. Feel yourself expanding. Feel yourself moving into a higher awareness. And just accept whatever comes to you. Feel as if you're being rained upon from above. That spiritual energy and light and consciousness are raining down on you. If I already knew my right answer and I already had it, how would I feel? And assume that feeling. If I already had the guidance that I needed. And just sit with it for a moment. And now move yourself back to the presence of this room and know that everything has shifted. That as you go forth into this week, you're going to know what it is you need to do. You're going to get the backup and support you need, the guidance you need. Circumstances will shift and you're going to be on a treasure hunt. And you will get little clues that will show you which next step to take. And we say, thank you, God. And so now take a deep breath and let it out. And open your hands and let go of all papers or anything in your hands, because this is a receptive time, a time of letting in the spiritual energy, not just for yourself, but for the person to your left and right, in front of you and behind you, all around you, and even driving by on the road. Everyone receives this energy as you become receptive to it. I am now open and receptive to the living spirit of truth. I am now open and receptive to my intuitive guidance, and my heart is open, my hands are open, and I just feel as if showers, raindrops of spiritual energy are falling, energizing my being and lifting me up, moving me up higher and expanding me, lifting me beyond. And I just let go. Whatever the situation in my life, if I'm praying for a healing, I'm praying to be aligned with the consciousness that would best support that healing. If I'm praying for prosperity or harmony in relationship, I'm not praying for a specific outcome for someone to act a certain way or for something to show up. I am saying I am now aligned and attuned with a consciousness that will bring about the best and highest outcome. Feel yourself flowing, moving into alignment, aligning and attuning with that consciousness that will bring about the very best and highest outcome. But first I must offload and let go of all my attachments to specific things. Having to have things exactly my way can stand between me and my right answer. So I say to all of my attachments, I loose you and I let you go. I fully and freely release anything that I'm holding on to. The highest good, the greatest good. God, open me up to being aligned and attuned with my healing. Let me be put into the consciousness that would support the harmony and the abundance and the guidance that I need. Let me always remember that as I seek first this kingdom, this spiritual consciousness, I will get much better outcomes. That the spirit of letting go is a spirit of best and highest answers. And so I let go of my control of outcomes. And I put my energy on what I truly can control, which is my receptive consciousness. God, align me with a consciousness. Put me in the consciousness that would support my healing, my guidance, my harmony, my answer. Take a few minutes in silence, a few moments to feel yourself as if you're being adjusted, a spiritual adjustment, aligned and attuned, and you can feel it in the cells of your body and your energy all around you, within you. Feel yourself coming into alignment. As I pray this for myself, I pray this for everyone else in this room, and I give special regard for the needs of all the people in this room, that they too came. There is somebody in this room right now that came in with a need that they wouldn't speak to anyone about, but they truly need that spiritual infilling. They need that guidance and alignment and answer. And so I affirm this for them as well. Thank you. Thank you, God. And so it is. We're taking as our offering statement, I give into the flow of life and I receive abundantly. Together, I give into the flow of life and I receive abundantly. And silently. And again aloud together. I give into the flow of life and I receive abundantly. And so it is.